that 30 days before Chag, we're supposed to begin to prepare for that Chag. So we're now in the zone of 30 days before Hanukkah. So this morning we're going to start to look ahead at Hanukkah. We're going to learn from three different modern masters this morning. Specifically, we're going to learn from Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, the great illustrious Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University for decades. We're also going to learn from Rabbi Shor, the great illustrious Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva TORAH V'das for decades. Last week we learned from the longtime Mashgiach of TORAH V'das, Rabbi Moshe Wilson. Today we're going to learn from Rabbi Shor, the great Rosh Yeshiva. And the third personality is the son of Rabbi of blessed memory, the Nesiva Shalom. We'll talk about each of them as we get to them. But we're going to begin first with one of the whole entire story of Hanukkah, as it appears in the Talmud, appears as a footnote, right? Most holidays that we have their own tractate of Mishnah and tractate of Gemara that teach us all the various halachos associated to those days. But Hanukkah really appears as a footnote in the tractate of Shabbat, when we're dealing with the laws surrounding what materials are appropriate to be used for lighting Hanukkah candles, and how do we light Shabbos candles, and how do we light those Shabbos candles. Our sages then ask a question: do the same laws apply to Hanukkah candles? And in the midst of that discussion, suddenly they ask, wait a minute, we didn't even discuss what is Hanukkah. And they ask the question, my Hanukkah? And then we get into a few different discussions about the various laws related to Hanukkah and the candles we light on Hanukkah. So in the midst of that, we're going to take a look. The Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Bet, says the following: V'raminhu mitzvatam shetishka achama ad shetichla regel min hashuk. Okay, it's the discussion about when we're supposed to light our candles. We have the Mishnah tells us what? That we can light our candles until the last people are walking in the shuk, in the marketplace. My love, the kifta hadar madlikla. Okay, does this not mean that if our candles burn out while people are still walking in the shuk, then what's the halacha? We might think that we have to relight them. If the mitzvah is until when? Until the last person's walking the shuk. So we light our candles like we do here in Yerushalayim at Shkiat HaChama, and several hours later our candles go out, but there's still people walking in the streets. Based on this Mishnah, you might think, what? Do we have to relight the candles? So the Gemara says, no, that's not what we're supposed to learn. The itlo adlik madlik, the inami l'shiura. So the Gemara says, no, that if you hadn't lit, okay, at Shkia, when we're at the beginning of the Zman, you can continue to light till when? Until the last person's walking in the shuk, okay? And the candles only have to burn for a certain period of that, which most poskim say is around 40 minutes or more, okay? So, Rav Moshe Feinstein famously said that in our day and age, what is it? So he said in New York City, that means till basically till Alos HaShachar, until daybreak, because New York City is famously called the city that doesn't sleep, right? So therefore, Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote in a famous tshuva that one could light candles literally till daybreak. In Yerushalayim, I don't know if it's till daybreak, but certainly it's till very, very late at night we can light our candles. Okay, so it's very interesting. The Gemara then continues. Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. What does it mean? Ad shetichla regel min hashuk, till the last people are walking the shuk. Ad dekalia rigla de termadai. Until what? The Termadians, and we're going to explain who they are in a minute, stopped walking through the markets. So Rashi tells us who are the Termadai. This is the second text on our sheets. Shem Uma, it's the name of a nation. Melekte Eitzim, who were wood collectors. They were woodcutters. Umitkavim b'shuk ad shehochim b'nei hashuk leveiteim mishachashicha umavirim bevateim or. There were woodcutters, and the woodcutters were the last people. They were a nation of woodcutters, and they were the last people always in the marketplace. Why? Because they stayed until people were on their way homes to their homes after the workday. And in those days, we didn't have a switch we turned on if we want to have light or heat even in our houses. What do we do if we want to have light or heat in our houses? We needed to light a fire. And therefore, the last people that would be in the marketplace waiting for people on their way home who might realize, I ran out of wood and I'm going to go home to a dark, freezing cold house. I better pick up some wood. The last market open in the last stall open in the shuk was the stall of the woodcutters, and these were the woodcutters, this nation of woodcutters. And since on the way home we might realize, oh, I better pick up the wood that I need, people will go to them. And therefore, these wood gatherers were the last people, these non-Jewish, there was a nation, another nation, wood gatherers were the last merchants remaining in the shuk. Okay, so why is that important? Why is the fact, what Rashi teaches us, that they were an ummah, a nation of wood gatherers, why is that detail important in understanding that the halachic parameters of when we're allowed to light our candles are until they leave the marketplace? So Rabbi Soloveitchik is going to offer us a brilliant chiddush. In the next several pages, we're going to learn from an extensive article which basically summarizes a shir that Rabbi Soloveitchik gave. And this is on the top of page 2. And what I did is I broke it up into sections with a little bit of an English description, or not a word-for-word translation, but transcription. So if people want to be able to repeat over and say over the shir afterwards, they'll be able to. So this is what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. Harav hitzbia shemistama medivrei Rashi. The Rav points out that it seems at first glance from the words of Rashi, it seems clear from the words of Rashi, shepersume nisa mityaches legoyim kemo laYudim. That we would think that the mitzvah to publicize the miracles of Hanukkah applies to our fellow Jew, right? But says Rabbi Soloveitchik, based on the fact that the last people walking in the shuk were these non-Jewish woodcutters, and that's the parameter in terms of until when we're allowed to light our candles. So listen to what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. We fulfill the mitzvah of publicizing the miracle of Hanukkah, even if no other Jew sees our candles, even if the only people that see our candles are someone who's not Jewish. We could add to this, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, that sure, it's true that the idea of publicizing the miracle begins and starts with what? Sharing the miracles with our fellow Jew. But since we learn from our Gemara that the last people who were still walking the streets were not Jewish, they acquire the status of being what? The last ones walking in the marketplace. And since the last ones walking in the streets is a function of publicizing the miracle, meaning we're allowed to light our candles until there's no one else, the last person leaves the street, meaning till the last person might see our candles, since that's a function of publicizing the miracles, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, the conclusion must be that at least when it comes to Hanukkah and the Hanukkah candles, the publicizing the miracle applies, and you fulfill the mitzvah of publicizing the miracle of Pirsume Nes, okay, even if the only people who see those candles are not Jews, non-Jews, okay? So that's the first piece. Now Rabbi Soloveitchik is now going to talk about where else in the calendar year do we have a concept of Pirsume Nisa. There are two other significant dates on the calendar year. We have a similar concept of publicizing the miracles as inherent as part of the Yontif. You know what those dates are? Pesach is one of them. Purim, very good. Okay, Pesach and Purim. So listen to what Rabbi Soloveitchik says in this next piece. This is the second paragraph here. Bepurim u'bepesach, on Purim and on Pesach, shebehem kriyata Megillah v'Haggadah shel Pesach mahavim persumei nisa, where how do we fulfill the mandate of publicizing the miracle? Through reading the Megillah, right, and through reciting the Haggadah on the Leil HaSeder. Those are both a kiyum, a fulfillment in what? Publicizing the miracles. But when it comes to Pesach and Purim, there's no concept of what? Publicizing the miracles to non-Jews. Okay? The miracles that we publicize are what? To remind our fellow Jew. Okay? And the entire aspect of publicizing the miracle is only relevant to Jews in the case of Purim and Pesach. There's no fulfillment of Pirsumei Nisa by translating the Megillah to the vernacular or the Haggadah to the vernacular in order that non-Jews could read it. Okay? Yesh kiyum Pirsumei Nisa rak b'kriyat Megillah u'shtiyat arba kosot im amirat Haggadah lifnei Yehudim. The only way on these two Yom Tovim where we fulfill the mandate of publicizing the miracle is through reading the Megillah as a tzibur, okay, amongst Jews, and learning the Haggadah and fulfilling the mitzvah of drinking the 4 kosot and the Leil HaSeder amongst Jews. There's no Pirsumei Nisa to non-Jews. So now the Rabbi is going to ask a question. Ma hevdel bin Chanukah shebo Pirsumei Nisa hu l'goyim l'ven Pesach Megillah shebehen ein Pirsumei Nisa l'goyim. So the Rabbi is going to say, what's different about the nature of these days of Hanukkah, okay, where Pirsumei Nisa applies even to non-Jews, okay, that between that and the days of Pesach and Purim, where we don't have the same concept. Okay, so now turn our page over. So listen what Rav Soloveitchik says. Hamechaneh mishutaf ben Purim u'b'Pesach hu shebepirsum hanes naseh b'amsaot Talmud Torah. The common denominator between the mitzvah of publicizing the miracle as it's manifest on both Pesach and Purim is what? That in both cases, the way in which we publicize the miracle is through the vehicle, the medium of what? Talmud Torah, learning Torah. Okay? Pirsumei Nisa b'Megillah hu b'kriyat Megillah. So, you're right. The way we publicize the miracles that are recalled in the Megillah is what? By reading the Megillah. Shebemahuto hi Talmud Torah shebechtav. That essentially you're reading a book of the Tanakh, and therefore that's a din in what? Learning Torah. Pirsumei Nisa b'Pesach hu b'sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim alakos shebemahuto hu Talmud Torah shebal peh. And when we read the Haggadah on Leil HaSeder, we recall the miracles on the Leil HaSeder. How do we do that? By learning the text of the Haggadah, which is essentially what? Learning Torah shebal peh. It's limud Torah. Lifnei zeh muvan, okay? Lefizeh, sorry. Based on this, muvan mipnei mash b'Pesach b'Purim sheben Pirsumei Nisa hu b'emseut Talmud Torah lo klulim goyim. Now it becomes clear why non-Jews are not included in the Pirsumei Nisa and the publicizing the miracle on Pesach and Purim. Why? Because the entire way in which we publicize the miracles, Shari Ein Lam Shaychul Talmud Torah, is through learning Torah, and non-Jews don't have any connection. There is no mitzvah to learn Torah. Talmud Torah Shaych LaYehudim Bilvad. Limud Torah applies to Jews only. Kamosh Katuv Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. Moshe instructed us in the Torah. L'umad Zot, based on this. B'Chanukah mitkayim Pirsumei Nisa be'emtzot chushim. But on Chanukah, okay, separate, distinct from this, Chanukah, we fulfill the mitzvah of publicizing the miracle, not through limud Torah, but what? Through our senses. Riyat hanerot, through seeing the candles. L'chein emtzai zeh Pirsumei Nisa shayach kam l'goyim. And therefore, this concept of Pirsumei Nisa, the central idea of Pirsumei Nisa, is applicable even to whom? Non-Jews. We have a mandate to publicize the miracles even to the other nations of the world. So now Rabbi Soloveitchik is going to bring this all together and explain something beautiful. Harav Hosif Amik B'derech Drush. The Rav added and added another layer in the way of drush, of 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 commentary, of how you say translate drush, expound. No, there's another word. It's a way of homiletics. Very good. The Pesach and Purim medubar b'atzal gufanit. When it comes to Pesach and Purim, we're talking about what? Physical salvation. All right. Hayishradatov the Kiyumosha Am Yisrael, the survival and continued existence of the Jewish people. Davar she'af hagoyim yicholim lavim lihizadut imo. Okay, this is something that even non-Jews can relate to and intuit on their own. The idea of physical salvation. Afilu habehemot chashad b'tzorach shahayishradut fizit. That even animals, okay, can intuit in their nature. They can what? Understands the idea of battling for survival. Survival of the fittest, right? Mishum kach ein tzarich lefarsem lumot haolam et ha'atzala gufanit shel yidim. Therefore, there's no chiddush that we're teaching the nations of the world, says Rabbi Soloveitchik. Yes, in the story of Pesach and in Purim, it's a story of what? The Jewish people surviving and being eternal. But every single people knows how to what? Stand up for themselves and fight for themselves. We may not always succeed in the nations of the world, right? But it's something innate within every single human being, within every single being, every single creature. This idea of trying with all our might to survive. But what's different about Hanukkah? What's Hanukkah about? Spiritual survival. Okay? The Greeks did not want to kill us. The Greeks wanted to what? Assimilate and acculturate us. Okay? So therefore, the story of Hanukkah and the miracles of Hanukkah are not about the physical salvation of the Jewish people and the physical survival of the Jewish people. It's about what? The spiritual survival of everything that Am Yisrael represents and everything that guides us, the TORAH Kadosha. Okay? And therefore, he says the following. יהודים מוכנים ומסוגלים לחום למען הישרדות וקיום רוחניים, ולא למען חייהם הפיזיים בלבד. Jews are ready to what? Stand up and fight for our spiritual lives, not solely for our physical salvation. V'zeu chidush mar'ish ma'od l'umot ha'olam. And this is Rabbi Soloveitchik. This is an incredibly profound and important message to give over to the other nations of the world. L'chein b'Chanukah miyuad b'hirsumei nisa gam klapei umos ha'olam. And therefore, that's why on Hanukkah, the mitzvah of publicizing the miracle is relevant and applicable even to if we're only going to share those miracles with non-Jews. A beautiful chiddush from Rabbi Soloveitchik in interpreting our Gemara. Now we're going to learn from Rabbi Gedalia Shor, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Rabbi Gedalia Shor was a longtime Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Torah V'das in Brooklyn, New York. And he was the author of a beautiful, or I guess his sons actually put it together posthumously, a beautiful sefer called Or Gedaliahu, which we're going to learn from the short piece from Or Gedaliahu now together. In this piece, Rabbi Gedalia Shor is going to quote a beautiful teaching from the Chidushei Arim, the first Gera Rebbe, that is going to take a totally different take, a completely different spin on our Gemara about the last people that are walking the shuk, on that expression, Ad Shetichla Regel. So let's take a look at Rabbi Gedalia Shor's beautiful words. Umatzinu od shechanukah hu inyan shel hitchadshut. And we learn and we find even more, even deeper, that the message of Hanukkah is all about this idea of hitchadshut, renewal, fresh start. Okay? Something that all of us at OUisrael are experiencing right now. I was at the former site of the OUisrael Center yesterday as the movers were moving everything out. And so we're going through this experience of hitchadshut renewal right now. So he says, "Ukishmo Chanukah shehu milashon chinuch k'deita b'shalakash," and the very name of the Yom Tov is called Chanukah, which comes from the idea of what? Chinuch, which means, we say it means education, but chinuch also means what? To start the process of growth. Okay, beginnings, like Chanukat Habayit, b'diuk. Okay, establishing a point of growth. Ki b'chazal matzinu etzel Chanukah harbe pa'amim nizkar b'halashon regilut. And our Chazal, when it comes to Chanukah, you see often in teaching after teaching the language of regilut, which means what? Consistency or regularity, right? To be regular, regilut. Okay, which is connected, by the way, to what word? What's the shoresh? Regel. Okay, ad shetichle regel. Now look what Rav Gedalia Shor does with this, based on a beautiful Chidush Yerim. Sh'amru, and now first he's going to explain numerous Ma'amari Chazal that include this idea of regilut or regel. The word regel or regilut in the teachings. So he begins with the Gemara on Shabbos. Hargil b'ner having lay banim tamidei chachamim. People who are particular or consistent when it comes to the ner candles, they will merit to see what? Children who are Torah scholars. V'chein amru hashir b'hadlaka ner Chanukah ad shetichle regel min hashuk. And also what? That the time limit in terms of when we're meant to light our candles, just the Gemara we just learned, right? Is till when the last footsteps are going through the marketplace. The Omer Chidush Yerim. Now he's going to quote the Gary Rabbi. Ki inya ner Chanukah. Listen to this. Hu levatel et harigilut. The idea of ner Chanukah is what? Again, we said Chanukah is about what? Hitchadshut, renewal. What is Chanukah about? Nullifying the regilut. Now that seems at face value shocking, because Yiddishkeit's all about consistency, right? About being consistent. But no, what happens when we do things consistently sometimes? It becomes what? Routine. Boring routine, okay? Shema shem mitzvos nasi metzlo mitzvos anashim elamda. That is all too often for people, for us as Jews, the mitzvahs become to us like what? They're just something, a learned behavior. It's rote. Okay, it's something we just do by rote, not because what? We're excited to do them. Kemo shemochiach Yeshaya Anavi vatihi yirotam oti mitzvat anashim ilanda. As a pasuk in Yeshaya Anavi says that you should fear me, and that it shouldn't be that what? The mitzvahs come to be rote to you. V'hu min hahergel min mitzvahs, and that is what? That often people become burnt out. They just fall into the routine. They're not excited. They may do all the maasim, but they have lost that enthusiasm for it. She'oseh otam mitzad regilut. They just do it out of a sense of habit and rote and regularity. Ubli hitchadshut v'hitlahavut, and without any sense of renewal and excitement, says the Chidush Yerim. Ubechanukah tzrichim al yidei aner Chanukah levatel zeh hergel. And when Chanukah comes, what are we meant to experience? We're meant to push. When we see those Chanukah candles, we see the lights shining. We're meant to be what? Inspired to what? Push aside all that regularity, that rote, that habitual behavior, until what? Until we feel that passion once again. And that's the idea of pushing aside the regel from the shuk, from the marketplace, from our activities. Levatel kol regilut, says Rabbi Gedalia Shor, to push aside all that habitual behavior. And this is what the Chidush Yerim sees alluded to in the pasuk in Devarim. Tuval b'shemin raglo. Okay, that tovel b'shemin raglo. Sorry, that he immersed himself in his foot in the oil. Shetzrichim lirot litvol ha'regilut b'hashemin. Oh, what does that pasuk mean? It's a pasuk towards the end of the Torah, when the blessings, are being given to each of the shvatim, reiterated to each of the shvatim, okay? And one of the shvatim, I think it's Binyamin, is told, Tovil b'shemen raglo, okay, that his feet should be immersed in the oil. So what does that mean? Says the Chidush Arim, it means, it's a reference to immersing ourselves in the shemen. What does that mean? We have to see and push aside the regel, the rot, and immerse it in the shemen. What's a reference to? Shehu mirames l'ner Chanukah, shehu b'shemen. This is the Chidush Arim. This pasuk is alluding to what? The mitzvah of ner Chanukah, which is the shemen. Okay, we have to immerse the regilut in the shemen. We have to take all that rote behavior, immerse it in the light that we see from those candles that are lit with the shemen, and therefore be inspired to what? Be reinvigorated. Okay? Through the Ner Chanukah, we have the capacity to what? Push aside all that rote. Who bali de krirus misrashlus b'avodas Hashem yisbarach. Because what happens when we get into too much of just a habitual behavior? What do we lose? We become cold, and we lose all the passion, okay, for our avodas Hashem. Sha'ayideh regilus who bali de krirus v'slashus b'avodas Hashem yisbarach v'hargel b'ner she'amru chazal. But what about the teaching that we looked at earlier? That one who's particular with consistent with their candles, that they'll merit to have Talmidei Chachamim. Af shalachora harigilut lemitzvat udavar lotov, even though it seemed that we just discussed what? That being consistent or habitual with our practices is something that's not good. Listen to how the Chidush Arim and Rabbi Shor explain the second Gemara. Hakavana she'argil et atzmo lehitchadesh tamid. Oh, what does it mean to be particular with the candles? It means to what? To be particular that every single day we are striving what? To experience renewal. Okay, it doesn't mean to be lazy and fall into the same patterns, but what are we consistent about? That every day we wake up and we say, what can I do today to make Yiddishkeit exciting and fresh for me? How can I serve Hashem b'hislavus, with excitement, with enthusiasm? And that has to be what's consistent. Not that we fall into just periods of rote and we just do the deeds because we're supposed to. No, we have to do them consistently with excitement, with passion, with fervor. And if a person is particular that every single mitzvah he does with that passion, with that excitement, that's how they'll merit to what? To see children who are Talmidei Chachamim. If our kids see that we're excited about Torah, if our kids see that we're on fire for Avodas Hashem, that's what's going to inspire them to also want it. Not because we just do it without any enthusiasm and we just go through the motions, but if our kids see that we are in love with Rebbeinu Shalom, that's what's going to inspire them, says Rabbi Shor. And then he concludes, Mashu ragil behischadshus hefach me'arigilus l'mitzvos shehu motzi lidei hisyashnus v'esrashlis b'avodas Hashem yisbarach. Because we have to do the opposite. Okay, when we get into rote, what ends up happening? We dry out and we lose any enthusiasm for serving Hashem. So what has to be ragil? What has to be consistent? This idea of hischadshus. We should wake up every day and say, how is my davening going to be different today than it was yesterday? How is my passion for giving tzedakah going to be different today than it was yesterday? That hischadshus has to be ragil, says Rav Gedalia Shor. Okay, now we're going to learn one last piece together. We're going to learn from the Nesiva Shalom, the son of Rabbi, the son of Rabbi was a Nitzol HaShoah. Rabbi Shalom Noach Brzezowski was a Nitzol HaShoah who came in Aliyah together with his father-in-law, the Birkas Avram, who he's going to tell a story about in a moment, who was the previous son of Rabbi. They came in Aliyah from Poland, and they settled in Yerushalayim. The Slonimer Chassidus was come out devastated in the Shoah. They settled in Yerushalayim, and the Nesiva Shalom that we're going to learn from begins his career here as the Rosh Yeshiva of the Slonimer Yeshiva in Mea Shearim. When his father-in-law passes away in 1981, he ascends to become the Slonimer Rebbe, and he becomes a world-renowned darshan teacher and Admor, and he's pretty contemporary. He died in the year 2000. So in that 20-year Kamat reign, if you will, when he served as the Admor of the Slonimer Chassidus, he really helped to rebuild and reshape the entire Chassidus. Today, it's a very large and thriving Chassidus, and his teachings in the Sefer Nesiva Shalom are amongst the most popular Sfarim that are out there in the Sfarim stores today. And we're going to learn a short snippet from the Nesiva Shalom about Chanukah and about this idea of Pirsumei Nisa and everything we've been talking about. He's going to really bring together everything we've been talking about so far this morning. Okay. Another idea related to this idea of publicizing the miracle. Adivrei shahaya pam achas b'mamad hadlakas ner Chanukah etzel Moran Admor b'birkas Avram ba'birkas Avram schuso yagen aleinu. He says, I'll tell you a story that happened one time when I was visiting, and our master, his predecessor, his father-in-law, the Birkas Avram, specifically when he was about or had just lit his Hanukkah candles. Okay, and the Birkas Avram, okay, when he went to make the bracha, listen to what the Rebbe says: Shibirech has a bracha she'asa nisim lavosenu bayamim ahem bazman hazeh bebechios noros shelafi hargil ubikushi sayem et bracha. Wow. He says what? When he went to say the bracha of Sha'as, the second bracha of Sha'asa Nisim Lavotenu Bayamim Ahem Bazman Hazeh, he began to cry and he could barely finish to recite the bracha. Umiyad Acher Shehadlik Patach B'Ma'amar. And immediately after he finished lighting, he explained and shared the following words. Shahaya Mekevan Keneged Radifat Adat Alachenu Sheberusia. He was thinking what? About the religious oppression experienced by our brothers and sisters in the former Soviet republics. In those days, it was during the days of the Soviet Union and the oppression that they were facing. Umitoch Advarim Amar, within this Sikha, he said the following mashal. Yesh ben HaMelech, there's the son of a king, Sheyodea et ma'asav she'eno roi ve'eno kedai, who may know, the son of the king, the prince, may know what? That his behavior is not quite up to snuff of the way that the king, a member of the royal family should behave. Okay, think about today. How everything the royal family does is in the United Kingdom makes the tabloids, right? So there's a king and his son. The son even realizes that maybe he's not the best example of what royalty of nobility is supposed to be. But he really wants that his father, the king, will spoil him and give him a present. Okay? But he's afraid to ask and be forthright and come right out and ask for that present. Because why? Because he's embarrassed by his behavior. He knows he isn't living up to what it means to be a prince, to be nobility. And therefore he can't bring himself, to ask his father for that present that he really wants to be spoiled with. And therefore he doesn't come out and say, Dad, please give me that new Lamborghini I always wanted, right? Doesn't come out and say it. I'm trying to think of a mashal that would be appropriate for royalty, right? So, Dad, give me that new Lamborghini I always wanted. He doesn't come out and say it. Rather, what does he say? He says, "Shalifnei shana u'shnatayim natata li kol kach harbe matanot." Instead of saying, "I really want that new Lamborghini," he says, "Dad, you remember a few years ago you gave me a Rolls Royce, and before that you gave me a Corvette." Okay? He doesn't go and say, Dad, this year I want a Lamborghini. He says, what? Don't you remember in the past you gave me presents? Okay? Shemitoch kach yavin avi vekavanato. Oh, so by doing that, what ends up happening? His father understands exactly what the son is getting at. Okay? The son may be embarrassed to ask for that present directly, but if he reminds him of in the past that the father always gave him beautiful presents, the father will get it and understand. Al divrei zeh anu maskirim. And this is what we recall when we recite the bracha, Sha'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim ahem bazman hazeh. Okay? Hashem, you should give up miracles. Just like you did miracles for our ancestors, you should do miracles for us in our times. Ribono Shalom. Harei asita imanu kol kach harbe nisim. God, Master of the world, you've done for the Jewish people so many miraculous things. Sheka'asher Yisrael margishim et atzmam ma'od b'shefel amatzav hareim maskirim sheb'shalenu zachar lanu. Even when the Jewish people have felt that they're in the worst of circumstances and we've been humbled, completely downtrodden, we're reminded what? Hashem, you're there with us and you've brought us salvation. Harei b'matzavim ka'elu asita imanu kol kach harbe nisim v'niflaot. Even in the worst of circumstances, you brought us so many miraculous miracles and wonders. And therefore, when we say that bracha, we're basically saying what? Hashem, we recognize we may not be up to where we're supposed to be. We may not be even worthy of your love and gifts and matanot. But just as you've consistently brought miraculous salvation in the lowest and most difficult moments throughout our history, so too bring us miracles and salvation in our days as well. My friends, as we begin to look ahead over the next few weeks and prepare to light our Chanukiot and those Neros HaChanukkah, may we be blessed to recite this bracha, Shasa Nisim Lavotenu Bayamim Ahem Bazman Hazeh, with this understanding. May we be reminded of our responsibility to teach the entire world of the many miracles Hashem has done to sustain OUisrael. That's the Persumei Nisa. May we be inspired to experience that renewal, to grow stronger in our Avodas Hashem, and may we be blessed to see and experience open miracles. Bazman Hazeh. Shabbat Shalom.